Well, people are inserting it into various places with different, depending on their risk profile. And I do think that's a smart thing to do. That there are a lot of companies that aren't putting it right in for translation, but are using it for QA or for cleaning up assets or for things like that. And I think for companies that have big risk profiles, that makes total sense to not put it right in your translation pipeline. But as people are putting it into translation pipelines, um, it's less controllable by default than NMT was. That people spent a long time adjusting to NMT output and sort of accepting the way that it was, and that became the way that they communicated. So it was very predictable. They also had predictable loops for how they would fix that, with fine tuning. And with LLMs, it often produces plausible, like fluent and adequate and like linguistically fine, but still wrong translations. And that's harder to check. Like that's harder, that requires intelligence to check. So it's not like if you just run QA checks and you ask another LLM, is this right? I mean, if it doesn't have the information to assess that it's wrong, like it's actually not wrong in the abstract, but it can still be wrong for you. So I think that's the place where people have trouble, is that it can produce plausible, like decent looking output, but it's still wrong. And the ability to identify that requires either language assets hooked up correctly, or still requires a lot of people to manage that and catch that.
So are we saying right now that instead of plug in AI on the what I call the peripheral of our operational structure, can we talk about AI being at the foundation of the process versus like what you said, post editing on the outside, or cleaning up data, etc. So at the beginning, is there any technology that is available right now at the core?
Yeah, there are some efforts in that direction, and I think some of the exciting things involve thinking about how to do multilingual generation. So instead of doing content as like created in English and then translated into the languages you want,
Transformative, right?
yes. And that loop, sometimes that's the reality of how contents are created, is sometimes they're created in one language and then translated to others. But if we think about how LLMs work, that you could do more with a system where you could actually co-generate, that you could generate things in multiple languages. But to do that, you need to have some uh, uh, information about the intention of that, about the how different concepts are referred in different languages. So the assets would need to take a little different shape. So like today's term bases and translation memory and style guides, they are useful components, but those being transformed into different kind of communication tools could enable multilingual generation rather than a post hoc translation pipeline.
Now, when we talk about generating content in the original language right from the get-go, and I've tested this several times, I speak three languages and that's fine. But for those languages that I don't speak, if I'm producing something in the language I don't speak, Elizabeth, it's very hard for me to know if this is correct or not, or has
Mhm.
any evidence of being sane. I don't know. I could be saying something
Yeah,
crazy in these things.
yeah.
I recall my first email in Korean. I was just biting my nail. Should I press send on this thing or what? From generate, skipping that steps that we call it the transformation of the content from one language to another in the localization. That's the reason. That's the raison d'être for the localization industry, I guess, to the most part. Of course, the industry is going through some transformation, and we'll find a different services perhaps to sell. But